Welcome to the debate. The most dangerous predators don't bare their teeth. They show you their wounds.
Oof, yeah, that is the absolute truth.
Right? We are opening the file today on the hidden, insidious world of covert narcissism, drawing directly from the clinical and psychological source material.
And it is dense, heavy material.
It really is. So the central question we are analyzing is this: where does the true focal point of covert narcissism lie? Is it in the calculated predatory architecture of how these individuals mask their grandiosity, under a shy, introverted, or depressed persona to extract power?
Or, conversely, is the crux of the issue found in the total invisible destruction of the victim's psychological reality and, frankly, their nervous system?
Exactly. Now, I argue that to truly understand this pathology, we must expose the calculated predatory tactics. I'm talking about the weaponized incompetence, the subtle manipulation, and the deliberate use of pity to gain absolute control.
Right, and I look at this from a very different angle. While profiling the abuser's behavioral tactics is certainly a piece of the puzzle, focusing entirely on their maneuvers misses the actual tragedy taking place.
How so?
Well, because the defining feature of covert narcissism is the epistemic damage. It's the systematic, invisible dismantling of the victim's reality. We have to look at how the victim's nervous system is quite literally hijacked.
You mean the somatic response?
Yes, leading to complex PTSD, chronic self-doubt, and a fawn response where they perform endless emotional labor just to survive a psychological trap. A trap they don't even realize they are in.
Let's lay out exactly what that trap looks like from the outside, because the camouflage is what makes it so lethal. When I look at the behavioral profile of a covert narcissist, I see a fundamentally highly calculated predatory mechanism. We all know the overt narcissist. That's the loud, boastful, arrogant personality that dominates the room.
Right, they're easy to spot.
Exactly. But the covert narcissist operates on a complete inversion of dominance.
The martyr facade.
Yes, the martyr facade. They adopt a victim persona to extract their narcissistic supply by presenting as vulnerable, helpless, hypersensitive, or even chronically depressed. They actively manipulate the empathy of everyone around them.
Yeah.
They demand that everyone walk on eggshells to accommodate their fragility. And I want to be clear here, this isn't an accident. It is a highly effective, stealthy way to gain absolute control over a family system or relationship without ever leaving fingerprints.
It makes me want to just sigh in frustration even talking about this dynamic, honestly, because of how invisible it is to the outside world.
I know.
I hear you on the profiling angle, but to me the core of this issue is the victim's reality. When I sit across from these survivors in a clinical setting, they aren't talking about predatory architecture or profiling. They are talking about feeling like they are literally losing their minds.
The confusion is part of the design, though.
It is. But the true horror of covert narcissism is what we call epistemic damage. The abuser's tactics are so subtle, so wrapped in the language of care or victimhood, that the survivor loses the ability to trust their own perceptions.
Their internal compass is shattered.
Exactly. This isn't just about someone being manipulative. This leads to profound somatic consequences. Their nervous system is constantly humming with anxiety, locked in a hypervigilant state. They develop complex PTSD.
Right, the survival mechanism kicks in.
Yes, their primary survival mechanism becomes the fawn response, shrinking themselves, appeasing the abuser, and constantly performing to keep the peace. That internal destruction is the true hallmark of covert abuse.
I hear you on the epistemic damage. I really do. But I can't ignore the intent behind it. That internal destruction is achieved through highly offensive, deliberate tactics. Let's look at the concept of the invisible invoice and instrumental caregiving.
Ah, yes. Where the care isn't actually care at all.
Precisely. A covert narcissist will perform physical tasks or make sacrifices, like, say, a seemingly devoted mother paying for her daughter's college or a partner spending hours cooking an elaborate meal. But it's not caregiving. It's a leverage. They are securing a debt. The moment the victim tries to set a boundary, assert independence, or even just have a bad day, the covert narcissist cashes in that invoice. They hit you with, After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me.
Which is such a devastating phrase to hear from someone you love.
It is devastating, and it is a trap. If you're listening to this and wondering why you always feel exhausted and strangely guilty after a simple coffee with your mother or dinner with your spouse, this is why. It's the invisible invoice.
Yeah.
They are like an anglerfish using a glowing lure of vulnerability and sacrifice to draw victims into the dark. It is a deliberate transactional maneuver for power.
I have to stop you there, because framing it strictly as a deliberate maneuver completely ignores the societal complicity that actually finishes the job. The anglerfish analogy is great, but it misses a crucial element.
Which is?
Society enables this specific behavior, and that societal enabling is what actually gaslights the victim.
Really? How so?
Well, think about the anglerfish using that lure. The whole world looks at the abuser and sees a sweet, self-sacrificing, devoted mother, or a deeply caring, sensitive partner. The outside world completely validates the abuser's false self.
Okay, I see where you're going.
So when the victim feels suffocated by this instrumental caregiving, they look around for validation that something is wrong. And they get none. Everyone says, "But she did everything for you. He's such a nice guy, he tries so hard."
So the isolation is compounded by the environment.
Exactly. That is the actual mechanism of the epistemic damage. The victim is left entirely isolated, internalizing the blame, thinking, "Am I the toxic one? Am I just ungrateful?"
Wow.
Yeah. The societal masking is what makes the psychological damage so incredibly severe. It's covert gaslighting. The narcissist sets the stage, but society unwittingly drops the curtain on the victim.
Byproduct of society's misunderstanding. It is actively cultivated by the narcissist through things like micro-insults and the silent treatment.
Right. If we look at how they punish their targets, the calculation becomes undeniable. An overt narcissist will yell and demean you publicly. A covert narcissist uses surgical, plausible deniability.
The backhanded compliment.
The backhanded compliment is their weapon of choice. "You did well, but I could have done it better." Or, "It's great you got that promotion, just don't forget who helped you get there." It's designed to destabilize.
Absolutely.
And if you challenge them on it, they don't scream. They withdraw. They use the passive-aggressive silent treatment. They ice you out, acting deeply wounded. Wait, look at how they use pity. That's not depression, that's weaponized guilt.
They are actively punishing the victim and forcing the victim to chase them, to apologize for an offense that never even happened.
You call it a punishment, and on a behavior level, it absolutely is. But we have to dig deeper into what the silent treatment actually does to the human body, because it is a literal neurobiological assault. It goes so far beyond just an unfair argument.
A neurobiological assault? Break that down for me, because that sounds intense.
It is intense. If we look at Dr. Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory from the clinical material, we see that humans are biologically wired to seek safety through social engagement. We read safety through facial expressions, vocal tone, eye contact, and connection.
Okay, tracking with you.
So when a covert narcissist gives the silent treatment, or when their words say "I love you," but their cold, withdrawn behavior signals a profound threat, the victim's social engagement system is completely hijacked.
Because the biological cues are contradictory. The brain is getting mixed signals.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Your brain doesn't know what to do with a threat that is masquerading as love or as a wound. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, is firing. It senses danger.
Right.
But the cognitive part of your brain is looking at the situation and saying, "But they aren't hitting me. They aren't yelling. They're just sitting there quietly looking sad."
So the brain is paralyzed.
It is like driving a car with one foot slammed on the gas, that's the amygdala, sensing danger and preparing for fight or flight, and the other foot slammed on the brake, that's the cognitive brain, seeing a quiet room and trying to stay calm. What happens to a car when you do that?
The engine burns out.
The engine burns out. That burnout is the trauma. This contradiction keeps the victim in a state of chronic hypervigilance. Their window of tolerance, which is the optimal zone of nervous system arousal where a person can actually process emotions, shrinks dramatically.
Wow.
They are forced into a state of panic or emotional numbness. The silent treatment isn't just a clever tactic to gain the upper hand in an argument. It is actively dysregulating the victim's autonomic nervous system. It forces them into survival mode.
I have to admit, that is genuinely chilling to think about. Framing the silent treatment not just as a bad mood, but as a physiological hack that burns out the victim's engine. That really reframes the danger here.
Yeah? But this actually reinforces my point. That biological burnout doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because the narcissist is actively injecting their own pathology into the victim's nervous system.
Yes, projective identification. This concept proves just how highly offensive and invasive this pathology really is. The covert narcissist has a fundamentally fragmented ego. They are filled with deep-seated shame, envy, and inadequacy that they cannot consciously tolerate.
It would destroy them to look at it.
Right, so what do? They split it off and project it onto their victim.
But it's not just a standard psychological projection, like someone who is cheating, accusing their spouse of cheating.
No, it's much darker. They don't just project it psychologically. They actively induce the victim to act it out. In a family system, this is usually the scapegoat child. The covert parent will relentlessly provoke, criticize, use those micro insults, and maneuver the child until the child finally snaps.
Right.
The child acts out in anger or frustration or starts crying hysterically, and the moment that happens, the covert parent completely calms down. They point at the child and say, "See? Look how unstable you are. Look how you treat me. I'm just sitting here."
They offshore their own insanity.
That's a perfect way to put it. They force the victim to carry their own disowned flaws. The narcissist gets to feel calm and superior, while the victim is left holding all the hysteria and shame. That is not just a trigger for hypervigilance. That is a calculated, predatory, psychological invasion.
It is an invasion, but let's talk about the physical aftermath of holding that offshored insanity. Have you considered the somatic toll this projection takes on the victim's body over time? We aren't just talking about a child acting out in the moment.
Right.
We are talking about adults whose bodies literally break down from carrying this projected shame for decades.
Because they can't process it. It's not theirs to begin with.
Exactly. The clinical material shows that adult survivors of this dynamic suffer disproportionately from chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmune disorders, and severe gastrointestinal issues.
The body keeps the score.
The body keeps the score. The trauma is stored as trapped energy in the fascia and neural pathways because the victim was never allowed to process their own reality.
And because, going back to your gas and brake analogy, they couldn't fight back or flee.
Right. Because how do you fight back against someone who is playing the victim? If you yell at someone who is crying and saying they ruin everything, well, you become the abuser in the eyes of the world.
You are trapped.
You are trapped. This brings us to why defense is the ultimate reality for survivors. Once you realize you are dealing with a covert narcissist, you have to fundamentally change how you interact. Victims learn the hard way that they absolutely cannot JADE. Justify, argue, defend, or explain. Exactly. The moment you JAD, you are giving the covert narcissist the emotional reaction they need. You are engaging with the false premise they set up.
You're giving them narcissistic supply. They feed on the reaction, whether it's positive or negative. The tears, your desperate defense, your frustration, it all just proves to the narcissist that they have control over your emotional state.
Right.
So this is where the gray rock method comes in, right? You cut off the supply by becoming completely boring, flat, and unresponsive.
You become an uninteresting gray rock. You give one-word answers. You show no emotion. And yes, mechanically, it starves the narcissist of supply, but this is exactly what trips victims up, and I see it in my practice all the time, especially for highly sensitive people or HSPs.
Why does it trip them up? It seems like a logical defense mechanism.
Because asking an empathetic, sensitive person to completely shut down their emotional responses, to become cold and flat, it feels like a betrayal of their own humanity. It is incredibly jarring to their system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, suppressing their natural empathy and emotional rhythm is a form of biological self-harm. They are internalizing the deadness of the relationship. That can actually lead to even more somatic symptoms, more stomach aches, more fatigue.
So gray rock works against the abuser, but it inadvertently poisons the victim.
Exactly, which is why the yellow rock method is often so much more effective and sustainable.
I'm familiar with yellow rock, but break down the distinction for the listener.
Yellow rock is about polite, calm civility. Instead of being completely flat and dead like a gray rock, you remain cordial. You say things like, "I hear your concern," or "I'll give that some thought," or "Thank you for sharing that with me."
Right.
You use a pleasant tone, but you absolutely do not engage emotionally with the underlying manipulation.
It's like putting a customer service voice on your soul.
Haha. Oh, that is a brilliant way to phrase it. Yes, it is a customer service voice for your soul. You are polite, you are professional, but you are not taking their behavior personally, and you are certainly not taking your work home with you.
I love that.
Yellow rock protects the victim's sanity. It allows them to retain their warmth and humanity, while simultaneously acknowledging that they are dealing with a predator who uses deep emotional engagement as a weapon.
That is a phenomenal insight. It shifts the power dynamic without requiring the victim to amputate their own empathy. Well, let's synthesize where this leaves us.
Sure.
From my perspective, exposing and understanding covert narcissism requires us to unflinchingly analyze their predatory architecture. We have to recognize that the shy, anxious, or perpetually wounded presentation is a mask. It is vital to understand the mechanics. Exactly how they weaponize incompetence, how they use the invisible invoice to create inescapable debt, and how they deploy micro-insults and projective identification as calculated tools for dominance. By profiling these specific tactics, we demystify the abuse. We take away the anglerfish's glowing lure.
And I would synthesize by saying that true understanding requires profound intellectual charity for the victims. We must recognize the invisible wounds that the world overlooks.
Yeah.
The real story of covert narcissism is written in the hijacked nervous systems of the survivors. It is in the epistemic damage, the chronic self-doubt, the physical illnesses born of trapped trauma, and the profound, ambiguous grief of realizing that the abuse was meticulously masked as love.
Right.
Healing isn't just about identifying the abuser's tactics. It's about repairing that social engagement system and widening the window of tolerance so the victim can actually breathe again.
We both acknowledge the chilling complexity of this dynamic. Whether you view it through the forensic lens of predatory profiling or the somatic lens of trauma recovery, covert narcissism operates as a profound psychological trap.
It absolutely does. And there is far more to explore in this material regarding the long-term somatic healing required to break free from these deeply ingrained trauma bonds. Recovery is possible, but it requires seeing the invisible.
Indeed. If you are listening to this and recognizing these patterns, know that the confusion you feel is by design and you are not losing your mind. We leave it to you to reflect on the invisible dynamics that might be operating in your own relationships. Because as we've seen today, the most dangerous predators don't bare their teeth. They show you their wounds.